Episode 30, The Hillsville Massacre. Hey y'all, I'm Heather, and this is Poison Appalachia, the dark side of Appalachia. As always, thank you for listening. Y'all, I'm so ready for this winter to be over. Enough is enough. I'm looking forward to spring. It's not too far off, thank goodness. I hope you guys enjoyed the Wholesome Appalachia episode on Ida B. Wells. Today's episode is The Hillsville Massacre. What is it about Appalachia that things are called massacres? I've also seen it called the Carrol County Courthouse shooting, but that's kind of a mouthful, so I think I'll stick with the Hillsville Massacre. This story is about a family much like the Hatfields and McCoys that had been around the area for years and were quite prominent and influential. They were powerful and people knew not to mess with them. This is about the Allen family. Jeremiah Allen was born in 1818 and a Civil War veteran, was a prominent landowner, farmer, and local office holder. He was also, many claim, a big-time maker of moonshine, whiskey, and brandy in Carrol County. He had a big family of 7 boys and 3 girls, most of whom doing quite well by the standards of the day. Of Jeremiah's large brood, the most important to this story are Floyd, Jasper, or Jack, Garland, Sidna, and their sister Alvarita, who married a man named Jasper Edwards. Floyd Allen, a farmer, storekeeper, and part-time moonshiner, said on more than one occasion that he would die and go to hell before spending a minute behind bars. Sidna was a successful storekeeper at Fancy Gap who had once gone adventuring in Alaska and Hawaii, been tried for counterfeiting, and later built the finest house in Carrol County. Garland was a respected farmer, schoolteacher, and primitive Baptist preacher, and Jack Allen was a wealthy farmer and a sawmill operator. The Allen family had that way of getting away with everything. According to their claims, Floyd's shooting of a black man in North Carolina was self-defense. Sidna was unaware that his employee and close friend Preston Dickens was using the plating machine Sidna ordered to counterfeit coins. It was self-defense when Floyd shot a man in the leg in 1904. Floyd got into a brawl with revenue officers because they got drunk and abused his hospitality. Sidna's nephews, Wesley and Sidna Edwards, were prosecuted for disturbing public worship because they were not members of a privileged clique. So, they all had excuses. So all of the events that led up to this shooting started out in the most wholesome and innocuous way ever. It started with a husking bee. So what the heck's a husking bee? At their core, husking bees were an important activity meant to prepare food for the winter. After the annual harvest, local farmers needed to ready their corn and for storage by removing the silky husk that trapped moisture and caused rotting. This process, called husking, ensured the family's survival throughout a harsh winter. The husking bee was usually held on a Saturday to make it a social evening. The ears of corn were ripped off to the stalk, the husks stripped off, and the ears were then ultimately either brought to a grist mill loose, barreled, or bagged, or at the farm. The kernel was machined off by a contraption into which the ear was inserted and a crank turned. In some areas, local tradition held that finding an ear of red corn was good luck, deserving of a prize. Red ears of corn were an infrequent discovery caused by an imbalance of sugar on the plant. The rarity of these red ears inspired local folklore. Some early accounts of husking frolics held that the individual who found a red ear received a kiss as a reward. For the young romantics in a husking party, finding the red ear became a highly coveted tradition. Corn shuckings were social events where the neighbors pitched in to help each other, and it was typical for a jug of moonshine to pass among the men. On December 1910, 2 of Floyd Allen's nephews, Wesley and Sidna Edwards, attended a corn shucking bee in Hillsville. Wesley got the red ear. Wesley, who had a reputation as a troublemaker, must have had one nip too many of the moonshine. He kissed a girl who should have been left alone. Wesley kissed a girl who was romantically linked to a local youth, Will Thomas, which led to an altercation between the 2 young men. At church service the next morning, conducted by Wesley's uncle Garland Allen, Thomas reportedly called out Wesley into a fight. According to Wesley, Thomas and his 3 friends assaulted him, and he defended himself with the help of his brother Sidna, who rushed into the fight. Wesley and Sidna were charged with disorderly conduct, assault with a deadly weapon, disturbing of public worship, and other violations. Rather than face arrest, the 2 men fled over the state line in North Carolina, where they found jobs in a granite quarry. The deputy clerk of Carrol County, Dexter Goad, obtained a new warrant for their brother's arrest, notifying the sheriff in Surry County, North Carolina, who soon arrested both men. A Carrol County Deputy Sheriff, Thomas Samuels, and his driver, Peter Easter, traveled into the Easters' 4-seated buggy to the state line and received the brothers from Sheriff Haynes and Deputy Oscar Monday. There was also only one set of handcuffs because Sidna had tried to escape a couple of times. Wesley was handcuffed in the front seat of the buggy while Sidna was tied in the back seat. On the way to the courthouse, the buggy passed several properties owned by the Allens. The road passed by Sidna Allen's store and Floyd Allen's house. And when Floyd saw his nephews trussed up like hogs, his notorious temper flared. Floyd was already angry because the other young men involved in the churchyard brawl escaped without punishment, a fact he attributed to his own previous fight with Commonwealth's attorney Foster and Foster's resulting in enmity. Wesley and Sidna had never been in trouble before. Neither were dangerous nor desperate and were charged only with committing a misdemeanor. Yet they were not only handcuffed, but also tied to the buggy in which they rode with ropes, despite the fact that they were in the keeping of two strong and well-armed men. What happened next, like nearly everything else in the Allen saga, is disputed. Deputies Easter and Samuels claimed that Floyd, Sidna, and Barnard Allen attacked and beat them and freed Wesley and Sidna Edwards. Floyd Allen met the buggy south of Sidna Allen's home as he was on his way to his own property. Deputy Samuels pulled a gun, later determined to be inoperative, and ordered Floyd to move away, and Floyd rode back past the buggy to Sidna's store, where he then blocked the narrow road with his mare. Samuels again pulled his gun on Floyd. A fight ensued, and Floyd beat Samuels with his own pistol. Wesley Edwards tried to grapple with Easter, but Easter got away and fired a shot at Floyd, and as he did so, wounding Floyd in the finger. Floyd then released the Edwards brothers. Easter ran to an acquaintance's home, and he telephoned the sheriff in Hillsville. Deputy Samuels was left lying unconscious in a ditch, and his horses were run off. Floyd Allen later stated that he never intended to have the boys set completely free. He just wanted them to be released from their manacles. The Allens claimed that Floyd requested his nephews be untied and was threatened with a gun, and single-handedly disarmed the deputies without harming either one. Well, if he did that, how did the deputy end up unconscious? On the following Monday, Wesley and Sidna Edwards were turned over to the court by Floyd Allen, and the two Edwards brothers were soon tried and convicted of their crimes. Wesley was sentenced to 60 days and his brother 30, which were served outside jail on work release. Whatever happened the following day, Floyd took his nephews to Hillsville, where they served the 60 days and 30-day sentences. Whatever happened the following day, that when Floyd took his nephews to Hillsville, where they served 60 to 30-day sentences, for his pains, Floyd was charged with illegal rescue of prisoners, as the Virginia law at the time put it. After several continuances, trial was set for March 12, 1912. There were many in Carrol County who believed that trying Floyd Allen on any charge was asking for trouble. Floyd's biggest fault, said his brother Garland, was his uncontrollable temper. Garland said that their mother had more than once been forced to tie Floyd up with a rope when he was a child. And by the time he was a grown man, his temper was legendary. It wasn't reserved just for outsiders either. Floyd and his brother Jack got into a fight once over some barrels of brandy in their father's estate and shot each other. Jack recovered, but it began to appear as if Floyd had fought his last brawl, and he sent out for his brother Jack to make peace with him. He said before crossing the divide. I don't like the way I've said that. Jack recovered, but it began to appear as if Floyd had fought his last brawl, and he sent for his brother Jack to make his peace with him, he said, before crossing the divide. Jack heeded the pitiful request and sorrowfully approached his brother's deathbed. He should have known better. When Floyd saw the grief-stricken Jack shuffling slowly to his bedside, he grabbed a revolver he had concealed under his pillow and attempted to give his brother a ticket to cross the divide with him. Jack was saved by another brother who grabbed Floyd's arm before he could squeeze off a shot. Floyd recovered from his own wounds shortly thereafter. He was too damn mean to die, said an acquaintance. Then there was the Combs incident. In 1904, Floyd wanted to buy a farm owned by one of his brothers, but they couldn't agree on a price. So a man named Combs wanted the land badly enough to pay asking price and bought it despite Floyd's warnings not to butt in. Not long afterwards, Floyd shot Combs, who recovered, and was indicted and tried on charges of assault. Contemporary reports say that Floyd let it be known that if convicted of the charge, he would kill the judge and the jurors. It seems likely that the court was influenced by such threats because, despite the gravity of the charge, Floyd was fined a mere $100 and sentenced to a symbolic 1 hour in jail. But even an hour was too much for a man who had sworn he would die and go to hell before serving a minute in jail. Floyd's lawyers managed to have the 60-minute sentence dismissed, and Floyd reportedly forced Combs to pay the $100 fine. There were some in Carrol County who believed that Floyd Allen was a law unto himself, and the Combs decision reinforced that belief. G.M.N. Parker, who wrote about the incident in the Mountain Massacre, said, Carrol County had two governments, one by the county and one by the Allen clan. So now back to the events before the trial. About 3 weeks before Floyd Allen's trial, Commonwealth's attorney, William Foster, received a letter promising he would die if Floyd Allen was found guilty. Foster took the letter to Judge Thornton Massey, who was scheduled to try the case, and requested not only extra deputies, but a search of all who entered the courtroom during the trial. Judge Massey denied the request. I think that would show cowardice on our part, he is reported to have said. Judge Massey never changed his mind, and when his body was removed from the courtroom on March 14th, Foster's letter and another similar one were found in his coat pocket. Floyd Allen was well represented by a two-attorney team. Both Walter Scott Tipton and David Winton Bolin tried Carroll County judges. The jury in Floyd Allen's case was unable to reach a verdict on March 13th. Judge Massey, in his only concession to warnings of trouble, had them sequestered in Thornton's hotel that night and scheduled the next morning's proceedings for 8 a.m., an hour early. Floyd Allen, still free, rode home with his brother Sidna and spent Wednesday night at the house. The next morning, everyone returned to the courthouse. Fearful of the Allen's reaction and having received death threats, many officials in the court armed themselves. At least two of the participants, Judge Massey and Sheriff Webb, had told friends that they expected trouble. Many of the Allen clan members were spectators in the courtroom, most of them armed with pistols. Sidna Allen and Claude Allen stood on the benches of the courtroom northeast corner to see over the crowd. Frio Allen sat in the back of the room, and the Edwards boys stood on the benches next to the north wall. At 8:30, the jury filed back into the courtroom with a verdict. Floyd Allen, his attorney W.D. Bolin, and the assistant clerk of court S. Floyd Landreth were sitting in the small fenced dock facing the judge and jury. Sidna Allen and Claude Allen were in the northeast corner of the courtroom, standing on benches to see over the crowd. Friel Allen sat in the back of the room, and the Edwards boys stood on benches next to the north wall. The sheriff, Commonwealth's attorney, clerk of court, and several deputies were standing at the south end of the courtroom. The room was hushed as the jury foreman announced the verdict. Guilty as charged, with a recommended sentence of a year in prison and a $1,000 fine. A motion to set aside the verdict was denied, as was a request for bail. Judge Massey instructed Sheriff Webb to take charge of the prisoner, and Webb began to move towards the dock. When the jury returned the guilty verdict, Floyd Allen is reported to have said to Judge Massey, "If you sentence me on that verdict, I'll kill you." The judge immediately sentenced Floyd Allen to 1 year's imprisonment. Most witnesses agree that Floyd Allen stood up and announced to the court something like, "Gentlemen, I just ain't a-going." A shot was fired, and for the next 90 seconds, the courtroom became a shooting gallery as the Allens, Dexter Goad, William Foster, and the law officers all produced guns and began to exchange fire. A screaming, shouting mass of spectators tried to leave the courtroom at once as bullets whizzed over their heads and thumped into the courtroom walls. Attorney Bolin dropped to the floor, and the wounded Floyd Allen fell on top of him. Bolin is said to have screamed at his client, "Floyd, they're going to kill me, shooting at you." The battle moved down the courthouse steps and out into the streets of Hillsville, with some of the Allens hiding behind the statue of the Confederate soldier while reloading their pistols. The Allens headed for the livery stable. Back in the courtroom, Judge Massey, Sheriff Webb, and Commonwealth's Attorney Foster and a juror named C.C. Fowler lay dead on the floor. Dexter Goad had been shot in the mouth but recovered from his wounds. Floyd Allen was wounded too badly to escape, and he and his son Victor, who had taken no part in the violence, spent the night at the local hotel and were arrested the next morning. Wesley Edwards, Friel Allen, and Claude Allen all escaped together and were soon joined by Sidna Allen. Sidna Edwards hid out a few days before surrendering himself to the authorities. Accounts differ as to who actually fired the first shot. Many accounts claim that Allen initiated the confrontation by pulling a gun in court. In his defense testimony, Floyd Allen stated that Sheriff Lude F. Webb fired first, but that the shot missed Allen, at which point Deputy Clerk Goad, the clerk of court, fired and hit Allen, causing him to fall. While Floyd fell wounded, he landed on top of his lawyer, David Bolin, who had ducked to the ground as soon as the shooting started, and who's the one that reported to have said, "Floyd, they're going to kill me shooting at you." Floyd Allen stated that only then did he draw his own revolver and began shooting. After a bunch of shots, the Allen clan left the courthouse, armed with pistols and 12-gauge pump shotguns, and shooting as they ran. Judge Massey, Sheriff Webb, Commonwealth's Attorney Foster, and the jury foreman, Augustus C. Fowler, were all hit and died of their wounds sustained in the crossfire. More than 50 bullets were later recovered from the shooting scene. Elizabeth Ayers, a 19-year-old subpoenaed witness who had testified against Floyd Allen, was shot in the back while trying to leave the courtroom and died the next day. 7 others were wounded, including Deputy Clark Goad and Floyd Allen. Floyd, wounded too badly in the hip, thigh, and knee to leave town, instead spent the night at the Elliott Hotel accompanied by his eldest son Victor, who was later acquitted of involvement in the shootout, which I mentioned earlier. Upon his arrest, the deputies at the hotel, Floyd attempted to slash his own throat with a pocket knife, but was overpowered before he could complete the job. According to Virginia law in 1912, when a sheriff died, all of his deputies lost their legal powers. Carroll County, therefore, was now without law enforcement, which makes absolutely no sense at all. I don't know why they would do that. Assistant Clerk of Court S. Floyd Landreth, realizing the imperative need for some sort of civil authority, rushed down the street to the telegraph office. Landreth sent the following telegram collect to Governor William Hodges Mann. "Send troops to the county of Carrol at once. Mob violence to the court. Commonwealth's attorney sheriff, some jurors and others shot in the conviction of Floyd Allen for a felony. Sheriff and Commonwealth's attorneys dead. Court serious. Look after this now. Governor Mann immediately called on the Baldwin-Felts Detective Agency to find those responsible for the shootings and arrest them. The Commonwealth of Virginia posted rewards: $1,000 for Sidney Allen, $1,000 for Sidney Edwards, $800 for Claude Allen, $500 for Friel Allen, and $500 for Wesley Edwards, dead or alive. The Baldwin-Felts Detective Agency in Roanoke were asked to hunt down the Allens who were still at large. A special train bound for Galax left Roanoke late Thursday night with Baldwin-Felts men aboard. Prevented by swollen creeks from making the last leg of the journey by wagon, the detectives trudged the last few miles in a chill, insistent rain. You guys may remember the Baldwin-Felts agent from my Mate 1 episode, Mate 1 Massacre. I always say that all these are connected in some way. I mean, they always come back to each other. The weather that greeted the Baldwin-Felts men was an omen on the way things were to be for the next 5 weeks. There was some initial good luck. Claude Allen was captured not long after Sidney Edwards surrendered. Friel Allen was reported to have surrendered also, but a local historian who made such a study of the case claims that Friel's father, Jack, turned him over to the detectives in exchange for the efforts to avoid his execution. But unfortunately for the Baldwin-Felts men, Wesley Edwards and Sidney Allen were far more difficult in tracking down in the rugged mountain country surrounding Hillsville. Knowing the train well, the pair easily eluded the frustrated detectives, who spent a good deal of their time posing for dramatic horseback photographs. The fugitives frequently had hot meals and warm beds in the homes of friends and relatives, while the Baldwin-Felts men slogged down mountain roads in weather that remained almost consistently bad. After 5 weeks of hiding, Sidney Allen and his nephew decided to leave Carrol County for the west. Passing through Mount Airy, Pilot Mountain, and Winston-Salem, which were plastered with wanted posters bearing their faces, they walked to Salisbury and bought train tickets for Asheville. From there, they went to Des Moines, Iowa, where they found jobs as carpenters and lived together in a boarding house. 6 months to the day after the courthouse massacre, Sidney and Wesley were arrested by the persistent Baldwin-Felts detectives. Sidney Allen maintained until the end of his life that he and his nephew were sold out by Wesley's sweetheart, Maud Iroller, who supposedly led the detectives to them in exchange for $500. But a local expert on the case says it was Miss Iroller's father who had never approved of his daughter's romance with Wesley Edwards. He tipped off the detectives that Maud was going to Des Moines to marry him. Floyd Allen was the first to be brought on trial for a charge of murdering Judge Massey, Sheriff Webb, and Commonwealth's Attorney Foster. Judge W.R. Staples presided over the courthouse shooting trials, which were prosecuted by Assistant Attorney General Samuel W. Williams and involved attorneys Draper, Landreth, Hogue, and Weiser. No autopsies were ever performed, and rumors flew of friendly fire casualty. The prosecutor's case was based on the formation of a conspiracy by the Allens to kill the trial judge, local law enforcement, and others who had wronged them in the event of a guilty verdict. J.E. Kern, a traveling salesman from Roanoke, testified he sold Sidney Allen a lot of ammunition at the March term of the Hillsville court, specifically 500 each of 32 and 38 caliber pistol cartridges and a 512 gauge shotgun shells. The prosecution attempted to show that Floyd and Claude Allen prompted the gun battle by standing and pulling their pistols and opening fire. Former Judge David Winton Bolin, who had been present during the shooting as one of Floyd Allen's defense attorneys, was the first witness the prosecution called at Floyd Allen's murder trial. Bolin had been standing next to Floyd Allen and was facing Judge Massey when the first shot struck the judge's robes. Bolin testified that Claude Allen fired the first shot, and that Claude Allen's pistol shot, together with the second shot fired by Sidney Allen, killed Judge Massey. Another prosecution witness was Floyd Allen's other attorney, Walter S. Tipton. Tipton testified that he saw Claude Allen in the courthouse with a pistol raised in both hands as if he had just fired it. During a second glance, Tipton again saw Floyd with his pistol raised and held in both hands. He then saw Floyd Allen fire his pistol. Yet another lawyer who had witnessed the shooting, W.A. Daughtry of Pikesville, stated that several young men were standing on the court benches at the back of the room firing their pistols like Custer's cavalrymen at the Little Bighorn. Deputy Sheriff George W. Edwards, who became the sheriff of Carrol County after Sheriff Webb's death, testified that as a deputy sheriff at the time, he had spoken with Floyd Allen just after Allen learned of his indictment. Floyd said that the Commonwealth's Attorney Foster would not give him a show, but that if he did, there would be a big hole put in the courthouse. The next witness was Sidney Toe, who largely corroborated the testimony of Sheriff Edwards. On a different occasion, he heard Floyd Allen make the same threat of putting the biggest hole in the courthouse that any man had ever seen. On the other hand, Floyd Allen and his relatives claimed Deputy Clerk Dexter Goad had fired first, prompting a long-standing vendetta he and Foster held against the Allen family. The defense attorney attempted to show that Deputy Clerk Goad shot Elizabeth Ayers in exchange of fire with the Allens, a charge Goad denied. Years later, an allegation surfaced that Deputy Clerk H.C. Quisenberry had confessed on his deathbed to starting the shooting. Two men swore on an affidavit to the effect in 1967, for which each man was reportedly paid $25. Others consider the alleged affidavit to be hearsay, made years after the event transpired, and worthless. In his testimony at the murder trial, Floyd Allen admitted he had fired at Deputy Clerk Quisenberry, and again twice more at the other unknown persons once he had left the courthouse. Deputy Clerk Dexter Goad admitted firing the second shot at Floyd, striking him in the pelvis. He said he thought Floyd's fumbling with his sweater buttons was a prelude to the drawing of his pistol. However, Goad denied firing the first, though wounded by 4 bullets himself. Goad recovered. S.C. Gardner, a Hillsville undertaker who prepared the body of Sheriff Webb for burial, testified that the sheriff was shot no less than 5 times. 1 bullet entered the back and ranged upward, lodging directly under his collarbone. A second shot entered the back about 4 inches lower, while a third shot cut the sheriff across the chin. Another entered the body at the cap of his left hip and passed through the abdomen. The last and 5th shot went to the half of the calf, and when his trousers were removed, a .32 caliber bullet was discovered. Attorney Howard C. Gilmer of Pulaski, Virginia, was at Hillsville Courthouse in a room adjoining Judge Massey's courtroom when the shooting broke out. Gilmer testified he'd heard 2 shots in quick succession, after which there was a slight interval and then a great volley of firing. He also testified that he saw the crowd come out of the courthouse and recognized Floyd and Sidney Allen as the last to leave, both of them following and firing as they backed out, apparently in response to fire coming from within the courthouse. The last 2 bullets were fired by Floyd and went through the 2 steps in one of the courthouse stairways, where they can still be viewed to this day. Gilmer said he heard Floyd Allen say 2 or 3 times, "I'm shot, but I got the damn scoundrel." County Treasurer J.B. Marshall testified that when the shooting started, he turned to escape the courthouse. After getting down the steps, he leaned against the window of his office when he saw 2 girls, Dora and Elizabeth Ayers, pass him. He testified that one of the girls pointed out some of the Allens leaving the courthouse. When Sidney Allen came towards him, pointed the pistol at him, and fired, Marshall then related that Sidney Allen's bullet buried itself in the window about 6 inches above his head. Marshall also testified that he had been standing near Sheriff Webb and did not see a pistol in the sheriff's hand. Another witness, Walter Petty, also testified that the first shots were fired from the courtroom's northeast corner where Claude Allen was standing. Petty also witnessed a pistol duel between Sidney Allen and the deputy clerk, Dexter Goad. At Claude Allen's trial for the murder of Commonwealth's Attorney Foster, Judge David W. Bolin was again the prosecution's star witness. Judge Bolin confirmed his prior testimony when he saw Claude Allen fire the first shot at Judge Massey from the courtroom's northeast corner, whereupon Claude advanced toward the court officers to where Commonwealth's Attorney Foster was standing. For his part, Claude Allen admitted to firing the pistol while in the courtroom. He testified that he saw Sidney Allen firing just about the time that he saw Deputy Clerk Goad fire. Victor Allen, whose pistol was used in the courthouse shooting, said he saw Wesley Edwards from the outside of the courthouse firing a revolver through the courthouse window and over spectators' heads just after the shooting began, and later saw Edwards run from the courthouse together with Sidney Allen. Victor Allen also asserted that Claude had taken Victor's handgun as the 2 left the hotel in Hillsville on that morning. Sidney Allen testified that he was not armed on the day of the shooting and that he did not like to carry guns. He denied firing a gun during the courthouse shootings and stated that he did not see who fired the first shot, but thought it might have came from the vicinity of Deputy Clerk Goad's desk. Sidney Allen denied that he shot Judge Massey or that he fired Commonwealth Attorney Foster, Sheriff Webb, or Juror Fowler. Allen claimed that when the shooting began, he drew his own revolver and fired 5 times. After those 5 shots, he dropped to his knees and reloaded his revolver. Sidney Allen claimed that when he left the courthouse, Goad followed him behind, shooting him through the left arm and the bullet lodging into his left side. Floyd Allen was tried for the first-degree murder of the Commonwealth's Attorney Foster, and on May 18, 1912, the jury found Floyd Allen guilty. He wept freely as the verdict was read. In July 1912, after 3 separate trials, Claude Allen was convicted of first-degree murder of the killing of the Commonwealth's Attorney Foster and second-degree murder of the killing of Judge Massey. After 3 stays of execution, Floyd and his son Claude became the 47th and 48th victims of Virginia's relatively new electric chair. Floyd was electrocuted at 1:22 p.m. on March 28, 1913, and Claude died 11 minutes later. The execution was accomplished despite some last-minute technical delays related to the governor-man's absence from the state, which were resolved when the governor returned from Pennsylvania for the express purpose of allowing the execution. In the final weeks prior to the execution date, petitions with thousands of signatures were delivered to the governor requesting commutation of Claude's sentence, who, it was said, had been shooting only for his father's defense. The petitions failed to convince Governor Mann. The governor was also unmoved by a number of death threats mailed to him, at least one of which was in the same handwriting as the original threat to Commonwealth's attorney Foster. Baldwin-Felt's detectives were never able to prove who wrote the threatening letters, and those mailed to Governor Mann are stored with his papers today in Richmond. The deaths of Floyd and Claude had a morbidly bizarre aftermath. The bodies were taken to Biles' funeral parlor, where, over the bitter protests of Victor Allen, thousands of gawking spectators gathered to view the remains. Richmond newspapers reported that school children with books, mothers with babies in arms, and young men and women out on the town filed past the bodies, laughing and talking. Victor Allen was not permitted custody of the kinsmen's bodies until 11 p.m., shortly before they were shipped by rail to Mount Airy. Sidney Allen pleaded guilty and received a total of 35 years in prison for the voluntary manslaughter of Commonwealth's attorney Foster and for the second-degree murder of Judge Massey. He also pleaded guilty to a second-degree murder of the shooting of Sheriff Webb and was sentenced to 18 years imprisonment. Wesley Edwards drew 9 years for each count of murder for the slaying of Foster, Massey, and Webb for a total of 27 years imprisonment. Sidney Edwards pleaded guilty in August 1912 to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 15 years in the penitentiary. Frio Allen was tried on August 1912, and after confessing to shooting prosecutor Foster, was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Democratic Governor Albert Lee Trinkle pardoned Frio Allen and Sidney Edwards in 1922. In April 1926, Governor Harry Floyd Byrd pardoned Sidney Allen and Wesley Edwards. Victor Allen and Barnett Allen were acquitted. Byrd and Byrd Marion, a cousin and neighbor who'd reloaded the revolver for one of the Allens, had all charges against him dropped. Accounts differ as to whether this was for a lack of evidence or since Marion became state witness and admitted his role in aiding the Allens. Shortly after Allen's trial, law enforcement officers found a still in an old house in Byrd and Marion's farm, and he was arrested for making illegal liquor. He was tried in federal court, found guilty, and sentenced to a year of federal prison at Moundsville, West Virginia. He began his sentence in August 1913 and died of pneumonia in prison in November of 1913. The Carrol County prosecutor placed liens on all the property owned by Floyd Allen and Sidney Allen and the heirs of their victims. After 3 wrongful death lawsuits by the victims' estates and survivors, the property was confiscated and sold at auction, forcing Sidney Allen's wife and 2 small daughters to live in rented quarters and to work at menial labor jobs until Sidney's eventual pardon. Floyd Allen's son Victor bought his father's house so his mother would not have to move. In 1921, however, Victor moved his family to Tabernacle Township, New Jersey. Jack Allen lost his job as constable as a result of the shooting and soon his life. On March 17, 1916, he stopped for a night in the roadhouse near Mount Airy, North Carolina, where he encountered Will McGraw, a moonshiner hauler. A dispute arose between McGraw and Jack Allen about the Hillsville tragedy. During the confrontation, McGraw drew a gun and shot Allen twice, killing him on the spot. Jack Allen was buried near his home in Carrol County in the presence of 1,000 mourners. A mystery surrounds the tombstone of Floyd and Claude Allen. The original stone supposedly read something like the following: judiciously murdered by the state of Virginia over the protest of 40,000 of its citizens. Most Carrol Countyans will tell you that the stone was removed as one of the conditions for the pardon of Sidney Allen and Wesley Edwards in 1926. Although a local person of great credibility claims to have seen the stone, there are some doubts that it ever even existed. Not only are several different versions of its inscription recorded, but amazingly no photograph of it has surfaced. There are hundreds of photos of every other item relating to the massacre, but apparently none of the tombstone, despite a $500 reward Rufus Gardner offered for a photograph of it. Says courthouse custodian and massacre buff Bill White, I have to doubt that it even existed to begin with. So this one was pretty wild. That shows what happens when families have too much power and think that they can get away with everything. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'd never heard of this story, so it was fun to research. You can visit Hillsville, Virginia, and it looks like there's a lot of stuff to do around. Historic Hillsville, Virginia is located in Carrol County in the Blue Ridge Mountains of southwestern Virginia. 14 miles north of the North Carolina state line, Hillsville has a land area of 8.95 square miles. I-77 runs just west of Hillsville, intersecting with I-81 10 miles north of the Carrol County line. With direct interstate access in all directions, Hillsville lies within a day's drive of half the United States population. If you want to visit the courthouse, it's now a museum. The website says, learn about the rich history of Carrol County in the museum located within the historical Carrol County Courthouse. Construction for the building took place in 1872 and 1874. The facility presents the history of Carrol County and its various communities. Exhibits and artifacts reflect the heritage of Carrol County, which was formed in 1842. Early Native American artifacts recovered from the nearby archaeological area are on display. Large Civil War collection, including drum used by a local unit. The courthouse was the scene of a tragic courtroom shooting on March 1912, where 5 were killed, including the presiding judge and sheriff. The museum has extensive archive and reference materials in its resource section. The Carrol County Historical Museum offers tours by appointment. Of course, this is somewhere I've never been. I know, shocker, right? But maybe someday I'll visit all the places I cover. Until then, thanks for listening. Follow me on social media under Poison Appalachia. You can visit my website on poisonappalachia.com. And if you could, please rate and like me on whatever podcast you listen to if it's available. And share. Help me get the word out and get more listeners. Have a good week. Talk to y'all later.